So hello and welcome back to the cold zone. It is so cold outside. I'm sure it is cold pretty much everywhere. I'm not unaware of the fact that the Arctic blast has come and knocked on our doors, and I'm sure that there are people around who are in zones that are even colder than me, but it's cold. I'm not pleased. It's funny. I can handle it in the 20s. I don't love it. I can even deal with the teens as long as the wind's not blowing. But I woke up this morning and it was 10 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. And we've warmed up. When I just checked the temperature, and of course it's starting to fall because it's heading towards evening now, but I think the high for us today was 7 degrees Fahrenheit. It's cold, so we're going to sit down. We're going to read a chapter of Beverly of Graustark, and I'm going to cuddle up in my blanket, which I don't know if Meta actually watches these videos or not, but Meta, this has become my reading blanket. If you don't know, this is an absolutely gorgeous blanket that was sent to me by Meta, one of my subscribers. And look at this dragon on this thing. Like, that is so cool. It's a bookworm, which I think is the neatest thing ever. It's this gorgeous dragon that is sitting there reading books. And I said, I could hang it on the wall. Part of me still thinks I should hang it on the wall because it's a stunning piece of art, but it's also warm. And so it has become my lap blanket when I sit down and read. So thank you so much, Meta. I don't know if you actually watch these videos or not, but if you do, I am very much appreciating this. Anyway, enough of that. Enough of me babbling. It is time to get back and read another chapter of Beverly of Graustark, where I don't think we've quite figured out who Baldos actually is. I mean, it's kind of obvious at this point. The man is not a goat hunter, no matter what he's been saying the entire book. I guess the question now is, which one of those three princes is he actually? And what else is going on? So we're going to jump back in. We are going to be reading chapter XXVIII 28 of Beverly of Graustark, and chapter 28 is titled A Boy Disappears. This startling announcement threw the company into the greatest excitement. Baldos ran down the steps and to the side of the astonished princess. "Prince Danton?" she cried, unbelieving. Baldos pushed the boyish figure aside and whispered into Yediv's ear. Yediv smiled warmly in response, and her eyes began to sparkle. "And this, Your Highness, is his sister, the Princess Candace," said Baldos, bowing low before the girl. At that instant, the girl at Yediv's side ceased to be the timid, cringing boy. Her chin went up in a truly regal state as she calmly, even haughtily, responded to the dazed, half-earnest salutes of all the men. With a rare smile, a knowing one in which mischief was paramount, she spoke to Baldos, giving him her hand to kiss. "Ah, my dear Baldos, you have achieved your sweetest triumph, the theatrical climax to all this time of plotting. My brother's sister loves you for all of this. Your Highness." The girl turned to Yediv with a captivating smile. "Is the luckless sister of Danton welcome in your castle? May I actually rest here in peace? It's been such a long year, this last week," she sighed, Fatigue shot into the girl's sweet face, and Yetive decided that she loved her unreservedly. As Yetive drew the slight figure up the steps, she turned and said to her ministers, "I shall be glad to receive Prince Stanton in the throne room without delay. I'm going to go put the princess to bed." "Your Highness," said Baldos, "may I be the first to announce to you that there will be no war with Dawsbergen?" This was too much. Even Marlanx looked at his enemy with something like a collapse in his eyes. "What do you mean?" said Laurie, seizing Baldos by the arm. "I mean that Prince Danton is here to announce the recapture of Gabriel, his half-brother. Before the hour is up, your own men from the dungeon in the mountains will come to report the return of the fugitive. This announcement may explain in measure the conduct that has earned for me the accusation which is confronting me right now. The men who have retaken Gabriel are members of that little band that you've heard so much about. Once I was its captain, Prince Danton's chief of staff, the commander of his ragged army of 12. Miss Calhoun, and fate brought me to Edelweiss, but my loyalty to the object espoused by our glorious little army has never wavered. Without me, they have succeeded in tricking and trapping Prince Gabriel. It is more than the great army of Graustark could do. Your Highness will pardon my boasting under the circumstances." "If this is true, you've accomplished a miracle," said Laurie, very agitated. "But can it be true? I can't believe it. It's too good, too utterly impossible. Is that really Prince Danton?" "Assuming that is Danton, Grenfall," said Yetive, "I fancy it's not courteous in us to let him stand over there all alone and ignored. Would you please go to him?" And with that she passed through the doors, accompanied by Beverly and the young princess. Laurie and the others went to greet the emaciated visitor, all in rags. Colonel Quinnox and Baron Dangloss looked at each other in doubt and uncertainty. What were they supposed to do with Baldos? Was he still a prisoner? "You're asking what you should do with me, aren't you?" said Baldos. "The order is for my arrest. Only the princess can annul that. She's retired on a mission of love and tenderness. I wouldn't want you to disturb her. There is nothing left for you to do but put me in a cell. I'm ready, Colonel Quinnox. You will be wise to put me in a place where I can't hoodwink you any farther. You don't bear me a grudge, do you?" And he laughed so buoyantly and fearlessly that Colonel Quinnox forgave him everything. Dangloss chuckled, an unheard of condescension on his part. "We shall meet again, Count Marlanx," said Baldos. "You weren't far wrong in your accusations against me, but you have a lot to account for in another direction." "This is all some kind of a trick," cried the Iron Count. "But you will find me ready to accommodate you when the time comes." At this juncture, Laurie and Count Halfont came up with Ravone. Baldos would have knelt before his ruler had not the worn, sickly-looking young man restrained him. "Your hand, Captain Baldos," he said. "Most loyal of friends, you have won far more than the honor and love I can give you. They tell me that you are a prisoner, a suspected traitor. It will be my duty and joy to explain your motives and your actions. Have no fear. The hour will be short, and the fruit all that much sweeter for the bitter." "Thunder!" said Harry Anguish. "You don't intend to slap him into a cell, do you, Grenfall?" Baldos heard that. I prefer that course, sir, said Baldos, until it has been clearly established that everything I've said to you is the truth. Count Marlanx has to be satisfied, after all. And, Baldos, is everything well with her? Said the one who we used to know as Ravone and now must call Prince Danton. She's being put to bed, said Baldos, with a laugh so jolly that Ravone's face was wreathed with a sympathetic smile. I'm ready, gentlemen. And he marched gallantly away between the guards, followed by Dangloss and Colonel Quinnox. Naturally, the Graustark leaders were cautious, even skeptical. They awaited confirmation of the glorious news with varying emotions. The shock produced by the appearance of Prince Danton in the person of the ascetic Ravone was almost too much to be believed. Even Beverly, who knew the vagabond better than all the others, had never dreamed of Ravone as the fugitive prince. Secretly, she had hoped as long as she could that Baldos would prove, after all, to be no one other than Prince Danton. This hope had dwindled to nothing, however, and she was quite prepared for the revelation. She now saw that he was exactly what he professed to be, a brave but humble friend of the young sovereign, and Beverly was happy in the knowledge that she had loved him for what he was and not for what he might have been. He is my truest friend, said Ravone as they led Baldos away. I am called Ravone, gentlemen, and I am content to be known by that name until better fortune gives me the right to use another. You can hardly expect a man in rags to be called a prince. There is much to be accomplished, much to be forgiven, before there is a Prince Danton of Dawsbergen again. You're awful faint and weak, said Laurie, suddenly perceiving the man's plight. The hospitality of the castle's yours. The promise we made a few days ago, it holds good. Her Highness will be proud to receive you when you are ready to come to the throne room. I'm Grenfall Laurie. Come, sir, rest and refresh yourself in our glad home. An hour ago we were making ready to rush into battle, but your astonishing, welcome news is calculated to change every plan we have. Undoubtedly, sir, it will. Dawsbergen hardly will make a fight to release Gabriel. He'll be safe in your dungeons. If they want him now, they must come to your stronghold. They won't do it, believe me, said Ravone. Alas, I am faint and sore, as you suspect. May I lie down for an hour or two? In that time, you will have heard from your wardens, and my story will be substantiated. Then I will be ready to accept your hospitality. Outside your city gates, my humble followers are starving. My only prayer is that you can send them cheer and sustenance. No time at all was lost in sending to the gates for the strollers who had accomplished the marvel of the day. The news of Gabriel's capture was kept from the city's inhabitants until verification came from the proper sources, but those in control of the affairs of state were certain that Ravone's story was true. Everything came to a standstill. The movements of the army were checked, and everything lay quiet under the shock of this startling climax. Hang it all, growled Anguish with a grin, as Ravone departed with the guidance of Count Hallifort himself. This just knocks me galley-west. I'd have liked to have had a hand in it. Must have been great. How the devil do you think that miserable little gang of tramps pulled it all off? Harry, said Laurie, they seem to have taught us a trick or two. Well, the young princess was being cared for by Yediv's own maids in one of the daintiest bedchambers of the castle, Beverly was engaged in writing a brief but pointed letter to her Aunt Josephine, who was in St. Petersburg. She had persistently refused to visit Edelweiss, but had written many imperative letters commanding Beverly to return to the Russian capital. Beverly was now recalling her scattered wits in the effort to appease her aunt and her father at the same time. Her father, Major Calhoun, emphatically had ordered her to rejoin her aunt and head to America at once. Only yesterday, Beverly would have been packing for the trip home, but now she wanted to stay in Graustark indefinitely. She was so thrilled by joy and excitement that she could scarce hold the pen. Father says the United States papers are full of awful war scares from the Balkans. Are we a part of the Balkans, Yedev? Said Beverly to Yedev with a puzzled frown, emphasizing the pronoun unconsciously. He says I'm to come right off home. Says he won't pay a nickel a ransom if brigands catch me, as they did Miss Stone and that woman that had a baby. He says my mother's worried half to death. I'm just going to cable him that everything's off, 'cause he says if war breaks out, he's going to send my brother Dan over here to get me. I'm going to have Aunt Josephine send him this cablegram from St. Petersburg. They'll never fight in the Balkans. They'll just scare each other. Skip the headlines, Father dear. We'll be home soon. And I'll say love Beverly. How does that sound? It'll cost a lot, but he brought it down on himself. And besides, we're not in the Balkans. Aunt Joel's going to have a fit. Please call an ADT boy, Princess. I want to send this message to St. Petersburg. When Candace entered the princess's boudoir half an hour later, she was far from being the timid young boy who had first come to the notice of the Graustark cabinet. She was now wearing one of Beverly's gowns, and it was beautiful on her. Her short, curly brown hair was now done properly. Her pink and white complexion was clear as cream now that the dust of the road was gone. Her dark eyes were glowing with the wonder and interest of being a 19-year-old, and she was, all in all, a most enticing little bit of femininity. You are much more of a princess now than when I saw you first, said Yedev, drawing her down upon the cushions of the window seat. Candace, the princess, was shy and diffident despite her proper apparel. But she was such a pretty boy, said Dagmar. You don't know how attractive you were in those. The princess blushed. Oh, they were awful, but they were comfortable. One has to wear trousers if one wants to be a vagabond. I wore them for more than a week. You should tell us all about it, said Yedev, holding the girl's hand. It must have been a most interesting week for you. Oh, there's not much to tell, Your Highness, said Candace, turning shy. My stepbrother, oh, how I hate him. He had commanded me to die because he thought I was helping Danton. And I was helping him, all that I could anyway. Old Bappo, the master of the stables, who has loved me for 100 years, he says, helped me to escape from the palace at night. They were to have seized me that next morning. Bappo has been the master of the stables for 40 years. Dear old Bappo. He got boys' clothing for me, and his 2 sons accompanied me to the hills, where I soon found my brother and his men. We saw your scouts, and we talked to them a day or 2 after I became a member of the band. Bappo's boys are with the band now. But my brother Danton shall tell you all of that. I was so frightened I couldn't tell what was going on. I've lived out in the open for a week, but I love it. Danton's friends, they're all heroes. You'll love them. Yesterday, old Franz brought a message into the castle grounds. It told Captain Baldos of the plan to seize Gabriel, who was in the hills near your city. Didn't you know about that? Oh, we knew it days ago, and Baldos knew it yesterday. He met us at 4 o'clock this morning. That is, part of us. I was sent on with Franz so that I wouldn't have to see bloodshed if it came to the worst. We were near the city gates, and Baldos came straight to us. Isn't it funny that you never knew all these things? Then, at daybreak, Baldos insisted on bringing me here to await the news from the pass. It was safer, and besides, he said that he had another object in coming back immediately. This made Beverly blush. The three women were crowding around the speaker, eagerly drinking in her story. We came in through one of the big gates, and not through the underground passage. That was a fib, said Candace, looking from one to the other with a perfectly delicious twinkle in her eyes. All three of them gulped and smiled. Baldos says that there is a very mean old man here who's been tormenting a fairy princess. Not the actual princess, you know. But he came back to protect her, which was very brave of him, I'm sure. Where's my brother? She said, suddenly seeming anxious. He is with friends. Don't be alarmed, my dear, said Princess Yetive. He's changing clothes, too. He needs clothes worse than I needed these. Does he say positively that Gabriel has really been captured? Yes, said the princess. Did you not know of it? I was sure that it would happen. You know that I wasn't with them in the past, though. Yetive was thinking, a soft smile in her eyes. I was thinking about a time when I wore men's clothing, said Yetive. Unlike yours, mine were very uncomfortable. It was back when I helped Mr. Lorry in escaping from the tower. I wore a guard's uniform, and I rode miles with him in the dark carriage before he discovered who I was. She blushed a bit at the remembrance. And I wore boys' clothes at a girl's party once. I wore my brother's clothes, said Beverly. The hostess's brothers came home unexpectedly, and I had to sit behind a bookcase for an hour. I didn't see much fun in boys' clothes. You ought to wear them for a week, said Candace, seeming wise with her experience. They're not so bad when you become accustomed to them. That is, if they're strong and not so tight that they... You all love Baldos, don't you? Said Yetive. It was with difficulty that the listeners suppressed their smiling. Better than anybody else, said the young princess. He's our idol. Oh, your highness, if what he says is true, that old man must be a fiend. Baldos, a spy? Why, he has not slept a day or night for fear that we would not capture Gabriel so that he might be cleared of the charges without appealing to my brother. He's always been loyal to you, said the girl. I know, my dear, said Yetive, and I have known all along. He'll be honorably acquitted. Count Marlanx was overzealous. He has not been wholly wrong. I must say that in fairness to him. How can you uphold him, Yetive, after what he said about me? Cried Beverly. Beverly, you know I don't mean that. He has been a cowardly villain so far as you are concerned, and he will be punished. Never fear. I cannot condone that one amazing piece of wickedness on his part. Wait! You're the girl that Baldos talks so much about? Said Candace. You're Miss Calhoun, the fairy princess? I'm so glad to get to meet you. The young princess clasped Beverly's hands and looked at her with eyes filled with admiration and approval. Beverly wanted to give the girl a hug, but then the sounds of shouting came up to the windows from down below. Outside, men were rushing to and fro, and there were signs of mighty demonstrations at the gates. "The people have heard about the capture," said Candace, as calmly as though she were asking someone to come and have a cup of tea. Then there was a pounding at the boudoir door. It flew open unceremoniously, and in rushed Grenfall Lorry, followed by Harry Anguish. In the hall beyond, a group of noblemen were conversing excitedly with the women of the castle. "The report from the dungeons, Yetive," cried Grenfall Lorry. "The warden says that Gabriel's back in his cell again. Huzzah to Prince Danton!" Ravone was standing at the door, and immediately Princess Candace ran over and leapt into his arms. And that is the end of chapter 28. I still don't know who Baldos is, though. Like, I was really sure he was going to be a prince. Unless there's going to be yet another surprise reveal, maybe he really is just, well, still not a goat herder, but maybe he really is just a soldier in Prince Danton's army. Interesting. I don't know what I think. I am definitely giving this book credit for having enough twists and turns, and I still stand by what I said. This reminds me so much of the soap operas of my youth. So probably the golden hour of soap operas was probably the mid to late 80s, and that's really when I remember actually watching them. And that's what this reminds me of. It's like, how many twists and turns can you put into one plot? The answer to this is evidently all of them. So thank you for listening. I hope that you enjoyed that chapter, and I'll see you tomorrow.